that same spirit in mind, it's my pleasure to introduce our first plenary speaker, Dr. Justin Shewell, President of the TESOL International Association and expert in education technology. His keynote, Navigating the Future of Research with AI, explores how we can use AI ethically and effectively to strengthen our work while keeping our human values at the center. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Shewell as he opens SOAR 2025.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I love talking about AI and helping people improve their lives with it. So I'm excited to talk about navigating the future of research with AI. When people think about AI, there's a lot of different myths and misnomers and misperceptions out there about AI. So one of the things I like to do is I like to just start by explaining exactly what AI is and how it works. And then I'll talk about
I can do the other.
Some of the things that you need to keep in mind when you're using AI, especially when you're using AI for research. And then I'll talk about some of the ways that I envision AI could be used in improving and helping with research. So when we talk about what AI is, the very first thing we look at is sort of the categories of AI. There are three. And the first one is what we call artificial narrow intelligence, or weak AI. And this is the only type of AI that we have right now. And this AI is AI that needs to be trained. It has to be taught how to perform a single or a narrow task. And that's why it's called artificial narrow intelligence. So it does that task, like generating language or analyzing images, a lot better than humans can do and faster than humans can do. But it doesn't do anything outside of its defined task. Okay. Examples of narrow AI might be ChatGPT, or even the self-driving cars that we have are good examples. Another category of AI is what we call artificial general intelligence, or AGI, also known as strong AI. And right now it's just a theory. Who knows how long it will take before we have this one, but this would be artificial intelligence that doesn't need to be taught how to do a specific task. It can learn like humans do. And it also can do multiple tasks, not just single tasks. So it'd be comparable to human intelligence, you might say. And the last category of AI is what we call super AI, or artificial super intelligence. And this would be the AI that would, be better and faster and stronger than humans in almost every way. Okay, and I don't know if we'll ever get to this type of AI at all, or even in my lifetime, but this is right now purely theoretical. A lot of people think that AI is new, but it's actually older than me. AI has been around since the 1950s. When it was first conceived that could a computer think. And there's been a lot of research and breakthroughs, as you can see here on this slide. And so AI research is continuing, and the things that we're experiencing now with ChatGPT and generative artificial intelligence, it's just another step, another milestone in the AI research. AI evolves what we call machine learning. And I actually teach a course on machine learning at Arizona State University. And what it basically is you give the computer huge amounts of data. So in the case of ChatGPT, you give it trillions of sentences, and you ask it to analyze the data and look at patterns. And it starts to build sort of what we call a model of these characteristics and different patterns. And through that learning, it develops things like a semantic network, so relationships between words. It will develop what we call a neural network. A neural network in humans when you learn something, your neurons in your brain actually change. They get a stronger connection. So the more times you learn information, that connection gets stronger and stronger. So you can see here in this picture, an artificial neural network is represented by the arrows. The bigger, thicker arrows mean a stronger connection between two ideas. And so if the computer has to choose and make a choice about which one to select, it's going to go based on how strong the connection is. One milestone that we had in AI research was when IBM's AI tool called Deep Blue beat a human chess champion in 1997. And this is a good example of how AI is different and thinks differently than the way that humans do, which is a really important concept to understand. You can see here in this picture that you have a person on my screen, he's on the right, wearing the dark colored suit. And he's monitoring the computer and putting in the information where the pieces are on the board. And then the person on the right in the light colored suit, he's the human chess champion and he's analyzing the board. Okay. Well, the computer beat the human by analyzing 200 million moves per second to figure out which was the best path to beating the human. Okay. Humans don't think like that. We're not going to analyze 200 million moves per second and analyze every possibility, right? And so that's just a good example of how humans or how AI thinks and acts differently than humans do. Another good example of AI that we have, at least here where I live in Arizona, is we have these self-driving cars called Waymo cars. And so this represents a lot of the different characteristics of AI. It has a little bit of a memory, and so it can remember some things, but it doesn't remember where it was 20 minutes ago, other than it might be stored on its GPS system or something. But the AI doesn't need to remember that in order to drive the car, but it does have to remember that, hey, I have to stop at this intersection coming up here, and there's a car on my right, so don't turn right all of a sudden and hit something, things like that. So that's an example of some of the different AI tasks that the car drives. You've probably heard of this term, an LLM, which stands for large language model. This is the brain for ChatGPT. And this is a good example of what generative AI is capable of. An LLM combines the semantic network, the neural network that I talked about earlier, and creates this model where it actually can generate language. So well, I wanted to learn about what AI was, and I asked Google for a definition, and it gave me this definition here that you see on the screen. But it didn't create this definition. Google just found it for me. This definition was written by a human. And then I asked ChatGPT a few years ago now, actually, I said, act as an expert in artificial intelligence and define artificial intelligence to the average person. And so it gave me this very long, eloquent definition because ChatGPT likes to talk. And so I said, well, that's too long for me. Summarize it, the definition, into 3 sentences. And this definition you can see is pretty similar to the one that I got from Google. It has a lot of the same wording and that kind of thing. But this definition was generated by ChatGPT, literally understanding my prompt that I gave it, and then starting out with the words artificial intelligence, and then putting one word after another based on its decisions about what's the most likely word to come next to generate the sentences based on the topic and its understanding of what I asked it. And then I said to it, well, can you rewrite this for a middle school audience? And so again, the definition is pretty similar, but you'll notice it uses different vocabulary and examples. And this demonstrates some of the power of the generative AI. I'm not limited to what a human has written now. I have the ability to ask it to rewrite something, maybe even rewrite it in different language, a different language, translate it for me. And we'll talk about some of those things a little bit later. One really important concept that most people probably have heard of, at least by now, is the idea of prompts and prompt engineering. With most of the AI tools we have, they're what we call chatbots. That's where chat in ChatGPT comes from. And so we interact with it by asking it questions, and then it gives us a response. So the responses that we get are only as good as the questions that we ask. And that makes asking the right questions really important. I think of that movie with Will Smith where he says, "You're not asking the right questions." And the AI responds, or he says, "What are the right questions?" And the AI says, "That is the right question." So, so how do we ask good questions? Well, one of the first things we need to do is we need to provide the AI with context. We need to make sure that we're giving it relevant information and as much information as we can for it to understand what we're asking it to do. We also need to make sure that we clearly define the task that we want it to do and be very specific about what that is. Okay. And the last part of a good prompt is what we call constraints. These are any limitations or constraints to guide the model's behavior, such as maybe a word count, or in the examples I gave before, I said, summarize it into 3 sentences, then rewrite for a middle school audience. Those are good examples of constraints. So learning prompts and prompt engineering is a new skill that we're going to, as a teacher, I have to teach my students how to do this. As a researcher, you may have to learn yourself, but then also train other people on how to write good prompts. It's also really important to use AI thoughtfully because being a new tool, there's a lot of things that maybe we don't think about that we have to consider when we work with AI. Probably one of the biggest ones is the importance of verifying information that we get from the AI to make sure that it's not doing what we call hallucinating, not generating fake information. I'll give you an example. There was a lawyer when ChatGPT was first released, and he decided to ask ChatGPT to help him write a court brief. A court brief is essentially a research paper that they give to the court, right, with all the different cases that are relevant to whatever case they're working on. And it's used to provide the judge and other lawyers with information. So this lawyer asked ChatGPT to write the court brief for him, and he didn't verify any of the information. He did what a lot of my students do, is they copy and paste from ChatGPT and turned it into his teacher and said, all good, right? Well, the court clerk went to verify the court cases that were mentioned in the court brief and realized very quickly that most of them were fake. They were made up. And so ChatGPT didn't understand what a court case was. It understood that in a court brief, you have the name of a case and the name of the defendant and the plaintiff and maybe where it happened. And so it just started putting in words that looked like real court cases, but those are hallucinations. And so it brings to mind and it illustrates the importance of verifying information. And if you use something like ChatGPT, at least ChatGPT at the bottom says it may provide false information. Please check important details, something like that. So that's another important skill that I have to teach my students. It's also important to consider protecting data and data privacy. So I work at a university in America, and we have a rule called FERPA, which protects student data. If a parent calls me and wants to know a student's grades, hey, I'm paying for my son to go to school, I can't share that information with the parent because I'm bound by the FERPA law not to, without the student's permission. And that made it really difficult for me to use AI with my students' data because I couldn't put assignments in there to ask ChatGPT to give the students feedback or different things like that. And until our university had a contract with OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, that protected all of our information. As researchers, you deal with a lot of protected data, whether that's subject data, it might be something proprietary from your university, there's patent protected data, all these different kinds of things. And you have to understand that when you give it to the AI, however that AI maker, the company that made the AI model you're using, you have to understand what they're doing with your data. And so Knowing that is a really important part of using AI. It's also really important, excuse me, to understand that AI exhibits biases. And not that it's inherently biased, but it's biased because it was trained on material written by humans, and humans are biased. So there was a study that, for example, that looked at giving ChatGPT a paragraph supposedly written by a seventh grader, and the only difference in the paragraph was one word. It was either country music or rap music. And they asked ChatGPT to read the paragraph and provide it with a score on its, how good the paragraph is, and provide some feedback. And for some reason, there's a bias that rap music is more inner city, associated with crime, and country music is more associated maybe with uneducated people, things like that. And so they did this, 100 times or so with each one, and the scores for the different essays with the different words was different, just illustrating that there was some bias in there. And so it's important that we need to understand that. It's also, as I mentioned, important to understand that it doesn't think like humans do, and it often lacks the nuance of a human when explaining complex topics, or it might provide inappropriate responses. So I like this picture because most people around the world understand the phrase "it's raining cats and dogs" doesn't mean cats and dogs are literally falling from the sky. But if ChatGPT or the AI tool you're using doesn't have enough context, it might assume something like cats and dogs are literally falling from the sky. I've never tried this one with ChatGPT, but I just use it as an example. So when we think about AI and research, there are a lot of interesting opportunities for us. Of course, we can use AI as the topic of the research. We can study different models. We can see how different models perform when given different prompts and different contexts. I'm working on a study right now where I'm building a personalized AI-powered learning assistant for my students. And so I built this research project around this tool and having the students use it, and then I'm improving the tool based on the students' feedback and the way they interact with it. So that's another opportunity where AI is sort of the topic of the research. You might also do different studies, maybe language studies or other studies where you're role-playing with AI versus role-playing with other humans. And so you might study how two humans converse versus AI conversations, or maybe getting two AIs to talk to each other and seeing how that works. I mean, those are ideas for research as well. There are also a lot of AI tools that we can use in research. Probably one of the most useful is the ability for AI to analyze huge amounts of data and summarize it for us. You have 1,000 transcripts from research, and you say, I need you to look at all these and pull out the most important points. I was just in a workshop the other day, and a librarian here at our university was working on the idea of creating an AI tool that could rank and classify responses based on certain scales that they were using in their research, which normally you have to pay research assistants lots of money to do, or it takes a lot of time, but the AI can do it, they discovered, fairly fast and also fairly accurately with the proper training. Transcribing audio recordings. When I did my PhD, I had over 4 hours of audio recordings that I had to transcribe so I could then classify and quote in my dissertation and things like that. And that was a lot of time. I had a 45-minute interview today. I put it into an AI tool, and about maybe 10 minutes later, I had the complete transcript with timestamps and who said what. It was great. I wish I had that when I was doing my PhD. So that's another useful application of AI in research. And of course, you might involve AI tools in data collection, maybe generating survey questions, or maybe AI tools that go out and simulate subjects' responses to survey questions so that you can see how your questions are perceived, different things like that. kind of going back to our ethical use of AI that we were talking about before, if you do use AI in your research, I would make sure that you add that part, however it's being used, to the informed consent that you use when you do research, because your subject should know that AI is being used maybe to analyze their data or whatever it might be. Okay. Um, these ideas for using AI can actually be applied anywhere, but I also have found use for them in research. So I use AI a lot for brainstorming ideas. I want to do a study in a certain topic, but I'm not sure maybe what the best design is, or maybe what the best sort of subtopic to look at. So I might start by asking ChatGPT to give me a list of to suggest some subtopics I might look at in my research, for example.
Dr. Shewell,
Yeah.
we have only 1 minute to go to the
Okay.
questions and answers. This is so interesting, but time is not on our
Yes.
side.
Well, I can stop here and we can take questions. Let's do that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I do have two questions for you. A
Uh-huh.
few people were asking, Dr. Shewell, can we participate in your ML classes?
Well, the class I teach is an on-site class for Arizona State
Oh,
University students, so that wouldn't be possible. But if you enroll at Arizona State University, yes, you could take my class.
okay, perfect.
But the
Now,
concepts of machine learning are available in many different ways. I'm sure there's free online materials as well. So, but I encourage you to take a look at it.
perfect. There is a second question, Dr. Shewell. Can you explain how Gary Kasparov actually defeated Deep Blue?
So Deep Blue defeated the chess player, right? And again,
Exactly.
the way that it did it is it analyzed 200 million moves. So it looked at essentially every possible move, like Doctor Strange analyzing all 14 million possible futures in the Avengers movies, right? And seeing which is the one that's going to provide the best path to winning the game. Human chess players don't do that. They look at patterns and say, okay, I know from experience if I move it this way, then the next possible moves are these. And they're maybe looking 5, 10 moves ahead, but certainly not 200 million. So I see one more question in the chat that's kind of a good one. It says asking AI to cite its sources. I've had good and bad luck with that. It depends on the model you're using, whether that model, for example, can go out and search the internet. But when AI gives me information and it says it got it from this place, I ask it to give me the link. Then I go out to the link and I look to see, is the information the AI pulled from that link correct? I sometimes will ask it, where on the page in the PDF I gave you did you find this quote? And it will give me, a specific paragraph, that kind of a thing, because it's always good to verify the information that you get.
Thank you so much. Let me see the chat. There's another question. Do you think that students' over-reliance on AI is making them lazier and affecting their creativity in the long term? If yes, what's your solution to this?
That is a good question. I
Mhm.
haven't seen the research. There was one study that was done on that, but from talking with other researchers about that study, the design was somewhat flawed. And so I don't know that we have enough data to know whether it's really affecting people or not. Um, the way that I prevent students from over relying on the AI is I teach them how the AI works, that it's a probability machine. It's going to make a guess based on the patterns it's analyzed. It's not creative on its own. It's not intelligent really on its own. It's just based on these patterns that it's found in the data. And then I show them how it can make errors, and then so I sort of teach them what I've just been talking about, this idea of validating information and all of those types of things. And so that's how I curb them of their over reliance on it. I
Perfect.
also make sure that whenever they use it, they tell me they use it. They have to reflect on the process, all of these different types of things. I could do a whole 4 hours on just that alone, but anyway.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So interesting. I want to thank you. We need to stop right now. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. It's exciting to hear about this. And when we talk about AI and research and teaching, come on, we can stay the whole day and talk about it. And there are so many takes on this, but we need to embrace it. That's the first thing. We need to see it not as students cheating, but that's a teaching and learning tool that we can use and also for research. So I thank you, Dr. Shewell, for being with us today. And I invite the rest of the audience to join the different 8 breakout rooms that are now open. Have a look at the program, select the presentation that you're more interested in, and enjoy the event. Again, Dr. Shewell, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.